Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature successful business leaders, authors, top law firms, green energy companies, and more. Today, we are joined by the commercial director of NNEK and the author of Decoding Decisions, Michiel van Vugt. Michiel, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Matthew. Great to be here. Great
to have you. Before we get too far in, a very quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past theirs. That's where CyberLink's intrusion detection comes in. With our 24/7 security operations center, we monitor your computers, networks, and cloud accounts using a combination of AI and highly skilled cybersecurity technicians to detect any signs of attack or intrusion. So if a bad guy gets past your security, we'll know right away and be able to kick them out. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Michiel, so first of all, let me start off by saying your book, Decoding Decisions, absolutely loved it. Thought it was really fantastic. Loved how you laid it out. But for those who aren't, who aren't aware, can you tell us what was your inspiration for this?
Well, there's a funny story behind it. I will maybe explain later, but the basic inspiration is that I want to help people make better decisions, right? So I live in the Netherlands. You might hear my accent. And we have 17 million people. And my personal goal is, because of my work, is to inspire 10 million people in the Netherlands to make better decisions, financially and also in their general life. And why I think this is important is your question. Well, basically because in our country, and probably also in yours, we have a lot of freedom, which basically means that if you know what you want, you can actually achieve it if you have the right tools. And one of those tools is that you know how to make proper decisions, so you can, improve yourself and the people all around you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, let me ask you. So when it comes to decision making, and I guess we could dive into the why and the whatnot, but let's go to let's start out with how people make bad decisions and how they can make good decisions.
Yeah, well, in general, we make decisions based on our gut feeling mostly, because we are not capable of thinking through every decision we have to make, because it's too much. So the most of the time we make a decision is just because of sort of our feelings, our gut feeling, and what we experienced in the past. So if you're not aware of that, then it's, you don't know how to make decisions, right? So the book is, explaining a lot of ways how you make a decision and what you can do to change that. But we are never learned how to make decisions, right? So we just do what we think is best for us. Whereas most of the time it's just because for instance, we tend to feel secure in a group. So if a whole group is moving in a certain direction, you are familiar with this, we tend to move with that group. But sometimes you got to ask yourself the question, is this actually my group? Do they have my interest in, is it my interest, in my best interest, let's say, if I follow this group? Or should I, lay out my own route to my success or my things I want to do? And if you're not familiar with all those, little insights, it's very easy to just follow along without thinking properly.
Well, let me ask you. So a lot of people kind of embrace this idea of intuition being, that's what guides them. They're guided by their gut. It's served them very well in the past, and so they make their decisions based on that. What would you say to that?
Yeah, it depends on how your intuition basically develop, right? Because if you have a very bad experience like a decade ago, it can still influence your decisions today. Because like 95% of decision making is subconscious. So it's based out of your experience in the past, or just how you feel basically, or your gut feeling, or your instinct, or your intuition. However, if you are not aware that, for instance, an experience like myself, I am afraid of dogs, right? And I know why, because let's say 30 years ago, I went for a hike with my parents, and there was a big cow with a dog in the middle of the road. The dog was protecting this cow, and he was really, really aggressive. So the dog was showing his teeth, and was like a proper guard dog. He didn't do anything, but I was scared shitless.
Yeah.
So nothing happened. But since then, I am afraid of even little dogs. And now I can rationalize that most dogs won't attack me. But because of this experience 30 years ago, I tend to avoid places where dogs are, which doesn't serve me well, since my family-in-law has a lot of dogs. So I need to see my parents-in-law as well. So you need to rethink sometimes. And if you are aware how your decision or your feeling or your intuition basically developed, it's easier to change that. And if you have a couple of tricks on how to change it, you can actually do it.
Okay, interesting. Now, I think you talk about in the book how we're kind of lazy in terms of our minds and wanting to make decisions, and I think that leads people to the point where they can, they kind of justify using their gut, right? Because, well,
Yeah,
I don't
sure,
really
yeah.
have to make the decision. I could, right?
Yeah.
But what would what's your advice to people on why that's bad, and how they can go about deciding to change that, making this one decision to make better decisions?
Right.
How do you get them to that point?
Well, it's not a problem that we make a lot of decisions based out of our gut or intuition. And we're lazy, but this is also because we need to conserve our energy, right? If you look into your brain, approximately 25% of your energy you use daily is used by your brain, which is a very small organ, but you still use a lot of energy. And as humans, we tend to save our energy, because you never know if there's a tiger or a lion around the corner. So you need to save your energy to survive, right? So this is the same thing. If we are making decisions, we tend to do it by not thinking, because we seek for patterns, or we use our intuition, which is in 90% of the time, it's no problem at all. If you go to the grocery store and without thinking, you grab a carton of milk, don't worry about it. But if you just are aware that sometimes where you have to make important decisions financially, or for your work, or for, in your family situation, if you know this is an important decision, then you should sometimes, stop, think about it, and what is the best technique to use to improve my decision, or to look at my decision in a different way. So it's not a big problem if you make decisions out of your gut feeling, since you can't do anything. Imagine you're driving your car, right? And you have to think about everything you're doing, shouting to the guy who can drive beside you, or, calling your wife, or, looking in the mirror. You can't think about this all the time. You have to do some stuff just, because of out of your intuition. But sometimes, if it's important, take a moment and then use one of the techniques and make a better decision. So don't worry. It's not too bad if you make fast decisions all the time.
Well, that's funny, because when you talked about the car, it reminded me of the overconfidence, chapter. So in this, you talk about people being overconfident, people believing that they're, you ask everybody if they're a good driver, and of course everybody thinks they're a good
Did
driver.
you recognize yourself in that question?
Oh, I'm a great driver.
Yeah, you
I'm a
are.
fan.
You're better than most, right? Are you? Aren't you?
Obviously. I mean,
For
come
sure.
on.
Yeah.
But and so let's dive into that a little bit, because I think that's really, it's a really interesting one when it comes to overconfidence. And we recently had a guest on the podcast, and I don't think it came out, but they did this book. Hold on, let me get this, not plugging another, but they kind of they had this book called Wise Confidence, and it's really interesting. Yeah, by a great book, Giovanni Dienstman. Does a great job really breaking down confidence. And I loved how you talked about, confidence here. And so I'd like to just kind of dive into that real fast. And if you would explain to people, kind of that, I guess, overconfidence fallacy, if you will,
Yeah.
and how that can be a good thing, and how sometimes it's a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, in the book, I'm talking about the situation that you're driving a car, right, and you're in a traffic jam, and you're thinking about the situation, and basically there's a traffic jam because someone else who can drive, messed up. So now you're in this traffic jam, right? And if you ask this question to a lot of people, and you ask them, have you ever been in such a situation? And then you ask, well, this won't happen to you, right? Because you are a better driver than most, aren't you? Then about 93% of people will answer yes. You're right. I am a better driver than most, which is statistically impossible, right?
Right.
Right. Half of the people is better than the other half. That's it. But still, because we have this overconfidence, we make a lot of decisions which sometimes are great, because if you are not confident or overconfident, you will never start a business, for instance. Many people who start a business think they have the best idea. They will make a lot of money. They will help the world. They will solve the unemployment problem, whatever. Whereas most businesses fail, right? But luckily, we have as overconfidence bias, so we think we can do it. And same with, I think it's in the book as well, that I think a lot of guys think they are a very good lover, right? Well, luckily we think that, otherwise, there will never be new children, right? So we need to be overconfident in that sense, and it's in a lot of way. But on the other side, sometimes you have to reconsider this as well, especially if you make decisions, for instance, financially. If you think, I know this better because I am a really good investor. No, you're not. This is your overconfidence speaking. And then you should sometimes, stop again, think about it. Is it really true? Why am I really good? You're probably not. So then maybe seek help, or check the information in a different way. So it's an interesting thing, because if without overconfidence, not a lot of things will happen. But with too much overconfidence, accidents will happen. So yeah.
It's really interesting because we're starting to hear. I think it's becoming more popular. The Dunning-Kruger effect, right?
That's perfect.
So I think it's so important now, and I think it's perhaps now more than ever. It's so prevalent in leaders and in people, and you're like, right. Yeah. And so I think people are becoming more aware of this idea. But you address it in the book. Can you, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about it and how, and your kind of take on this?
Yeah, well, basically Dunning-Kruger, to keep it simple, is something when you don't know anything about a subject and you learn a little bit, your confidence skyrockets. And Dunning-Kruger, two guys like ages ago saw this phenomenon, and they created a theory about it. And they said, basically, if you don't know nothing, but you learn a little bit, you skyrocket in your confidence, and then you will end up at the top of Mount Stupid. You think you know it all, but you don't, right? And this is particularly dangerous if it's combined with another effect, which is the halo effect. I think it's also in the book, which is something like, if you have status in a particular field, like you're an actor, then you are probably also very good, I don't know, coffee taster. So that's the reason probably George Clooney tells us that Nespresso is the best coffee, because we think, he's a great actor, so he must be, very proficient in tasting coffee, which doesn't make any sense, but because he is this halo effect, this is this ring around your head when you are really good at something and people look up to that, you have a lot of status. If you combine this with Dunning-Kruger, you get I actually saw this video recently that, without getting political, you saw, and it happens with everyone. So, but this is a great example. When in COVID, I think it was April 2020, President Trump was on national television, and he was just, nobody knew, but he said, what probably would help if we, use something like bleach or something to kill germs, and maybe injection sounds interesting to me. Which is sort of Dunning-Kruger, because he learned something about bleach. He skyrocketed. He has a lot of confidence. People believe him because he's the president. And if you look at the statistics, a month later, twice as many Americans died because of bleach injection, which is, so sometimes you need to address this and also ask yourself, who is giving me this information? Is this person really an expert in their field, or are they a very good actor? Okay, maybe I should listen to a guy who actually has a good nose and knows which coffee is good, or is an actual doctor instead of a president, right? So and it happens all the time. We are being influenced all the time. But sometimes if it's getting important or life-threatening, in this case, wait, check it out again.
Well, okay. So in yours, I think it's 35 is the number of these. I don't know what you'd want to call them, fallacies, decision making things.
Yeah.
Right. And right. I'm not sure. I was looking for the right word there. I don't know what it is. But and it's really cool how you break it down in the book. So you could go and you can just click on like free. Oh, like what's that about? And you talk about how, when something is free, the kind of the psychology of it and how so this leads me to where I kind of want to take a look. So a lot of our viewers are business owners and entrepreneurs and whatnot. And so I want to take the look of that. I think there are two sides to this to your book. I think there's the one side of making good decisions for yourself, your business, and whatnot. But then the other side is I think on the as a business owner who's then how do you utilize these things to sell? Right. So how do you, knowing that people, have this kind of, there's a herd mentality, there's the, the choice overload, there's a bunch of these things. And, so I'd like to kind of explore that, and I don't know if it's the relationship between that, because on the one hand, as an individual, you want to make the best decisions possible. And then at the same time, as a business owner, you want to be able to, let's assume that every business owner or salesperson or a professional listening to this has an excellent product or service that they are trying to sell that will benefit their people, right? Their clients or customers.
Yeah.
They're good people trying to sell good products and services. So how can they use these? What are some of these things that they can use to help, further that? I mean, even in your business, I think you must run into the same issue.
For sure.
Because you're trying to help people invest, wisely. So there's that bit of, well, people make these irrational decisions. I'm trying to rationalize, get them to make good decisions. So let's explore that a little bit, right? Yeah. What would you say?
I'm really happy that you brought up, being ethical, because these are things you can also use to manipulate people and if you understand them well. So I'm really happy you brought that up. Thank you for that. But yeah, there are a lot of techniques also are, probably are familiar with Robert Cialdini. He has a great book called Influence. And also a few of those chapters in my book are sort of correlating to the techniques he has, like herd behavior is a very, very familiar one, which is basically social proof. So if you say it's a good book and your listeners also say it's a good book, many more people think it's a great book. And so it becomes a bestseller in the US, right? So people, do your job, please. But this is how it works, even though if you didn't read it, right? That's the funny thing. If I say this is the best show ever and I never heard it, it's still, all right, he said it must be good, right? So we believe our group. So that's the thing you brought up. I think another thing I think is really interesting, if you look at from a business side of a business perspective, is that we in our world now, probably in my country, but also in your country, we see a big division, right? So it's either left or right, or green or gray, or whatever. And it's explainable because we are, we feel safe in our own group, right? Actually, we make a lot of hormones when with my group of friends. I feel safe and I make hormones, so I feel happy and secure, and so which actually strengthens my belief in my own group. And I think it's in the book as well, but you might recognize this. If you, for instance, if I play a game of field hockey, which we do a lot here in the Netherlands, and we play against another team, most of the time the other team are, they're not really great guys. They're not so friendly. And I'm really happy that my team is, which is ridiculous because the other team thinks exactly the same, but because it's your in-group, you think you're better. And this causes a lot of problems. So from a business perspective, you lose a lot of clients if you just think we are left instead of right, or whatever you want to label it. So it's very interesting to find common ground where you are, for instance, you're not playing it against each other, but you're both liking something. So can you find a common ground so you can achieve or reach more potential clients instead of, being too outspoken or whatever it is, to achieve the goal you have is with your product or service, help clients. So that's a very interesting thing, because in my line of business, we are investing and we do a lot of indexing, which is passive investing. But of course, there are people who are more the active side, which is the enemy, if you call it like that. Which is not, of course, because they have the same goal in mind, also achieving financial goals for their clients. So they're just seeing it in a different perspective, which is also great, right? So find each other and try to help more people instead of, getting clients from each other or stealing clients from each other, if you will. So that's an interesting thing as well. Find this common ground and grow your business out of that, which is, I think it's also something the world needs, but it's also very helpful in your business. Something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you, so in your business, where you're helping people invest and make those good decisions, are there things from your book that you apply and you're like, oh, I mean, it's one thing to educate them, right?
Yeah, sure.
Right. It'd be great if every prospective client or existing client of yours read your book and was like, I make great decisions now, and they're applying it and they're great.
Yeah.
But that's probably not happening. And so I think from a business owner or a salesperson's perspective, I think we're under the belief that people don't make rational decisions most of the time. People buy based off of feelings and relationships. So you got to make people feel good, feel like they're going to make a good decision, like make it feel, so really you get them to feel right, and then they'll justify their decision afterwards. Sure. So knowing, having gone through the process of really examining decision making and having put all of this in and kind of analyzed it, where does that put you when it comes time to convincing somebody or selling somebody, with in terms of helping them make a decision? Do you go for, you make them feel good because you can't educate them and then they're going to make a decision, or what's your approach?
Well, we offer a service, right? So what our business is that people basically need to, our line of business is that people come back to us for the service we provide. So it's not a one-off product we sell, it's a service. So we want recurring income and returning clients. And that's with a lot of people, I think, or a lot of businesses. And what I think the most important lesson for myself is that even though I wrote a book, right? I did the research. I know how you make decisions. And still, sometimes for myself, it's impossible to make a rational decision. I sometimes know I'm being irrational, but I need someone to help me rationalize my choices. So let me give you a small example. I was in Thailand a few years ago. I wrote the book, right? I'm also an investment advisor, financial CFP, financial planner. So I saw myself as an expert on this field, right? I know how to make decisions. I know how the financial markets work. So don't tell me how it's done, right? I know it. And I was in Thailand, and the first 3 weeks of this trip with my family, went great. I didn't watch my phone. I didn't look up at the news. Everything was fine. But after 3 weeks, I was at the beach with my kids. They were playing in the surf. My wife was drinking a cocktail, and I was feeling a little bit anxious because I wanted to know what was going on in the world. So I opened my phone after I took a photo. I remember vividly, and I opened the big news app in the Netherlands, and it showed one of the second things I saw was the stock market in the Netherlands. And I remembered it was like 10% higher when we left. So it was in 2.5 weeks or something. It was a big downturn. So I sort of kind of panicked, and I called my colleague from work, and I told him to sell everything because, we're in stocks, of course. And he said, why don't you have any, are you moving to Thailand? Are you buying a house? What is going on? What changed? And it was different. And he told me, you should know better because you wrote a book, blah, blah, blah. You know the story, or you can imagine how it went. And I realized at that Thai beach that sometimes we need someone who is, looking at your situation doesn't feel the pain you're feeling, because I felt pain because we were losing money, was my opinion. So sometimes, and someone who says, all right, take it easy. What is the problem here? And there was no problem because I don't need the money, right? So the money is for 20 years. And I have 20 years of when I need the money. So what's the problem? There is no problem. So take it easy and come to the office, or let's schedule a meeting. Or so that was one of the biggest lessons I learned, that sometimes when it's getting hard, find someone who is rational, because he is not yourself. And this really helped me during COVID or during hard financial decisions in the business. Someone who doesn't feel the emotion you have is probably empathetic, but also rational. So this is really, really a big thing, I think.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's a great story to relate to people who, let's say you're trying to, convince them that, having a financial advisor,
Yeah, in this case, yeah.
provides you that, that educated, rational, we're going to make good decisions, because that's a great example. And people can probably relate to that. Be like, oh yeah, I'd probably do the same thing if I was on vacation and they called up and I was like, get me out of this so I don't lose more than the 10% I've already lost. Right.
Right.
So, but now let's, kind of going back to where you were talking earlier about like halo effect, and kind of, let's say, I think I really like this whole idea of, of the two sides of decision making as a business owner. So would you say that, if you use things like the halo effect, I mean, that's why we're seeing so many, celebrity endorsements and social media influencers, right? Because they can leverage that halo effect. So as a consumer, your advice is, hey, does Brad Pitt really know, what's best about whatever, or, or the coffee with George Clooney, is he really, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But the interesting part is the effect that has is like, oh, I drive the same car as Brad Pitt. I like that. That makes me feel like that's pretty cool. Right. And maybe the only thing we have in common, but I like that. Right. Or like, oh, I drink the same coffee as George Clooney. It's maybe not that great coffee, but you know what? I feel like it's a little better. And that kind of, I'm just going to riff on that a little bit, because I think that also leads you down this road, and it kind of ties into the free, but going into that whole luxury, products and luxury services, and that versus free, right? So there's a huge difference between something when you say it's free, now it has no value, and then you take something that you could have given as free, but you charge an exorbitant price, you charge a premium for it, and now people perceive it as being very, very desirable, because if it's that expensive, it must be that much value. It must be good, right? And I want good things. I want the best, right? So, well, bringing this to an actual question for you. So, what's your advice when it comes to things like that, where you've got, free, how does a business use something like free and pricing, and help people, the business owner, use those decision-making fallacies that people may have, but use that to their benefit and the business's benefit, right? So let's just go with pricing. So let's go with that free versus premium. How can you use that as a business owner to kind of, help your business and help the customer?
Right. Well, like you said, free doesn't mean there's no value, right? So if you just offer something for free, you can do that, but only if you, right?
You froze there for a second. What was that?
Oh yeah, sorry. So free means there's no value. So if I give something away for free, there's no value. So people, get it, and okay, that's it. But if you use it in a way that you want them, you can use reciprocity. Is that the English word?
Yep, reciprocity. Yep.
Yeah. So if I give you something for free, you could have the intention to give something back, because I got you something. And then it should be something, it doesn't really matter, but something you can actually use. So it could be a service or a white paper or, I don't know, pen, whatever, but give something free, which is not expensive, but, gets you a little bit further. Then people in general tend to sort of pay you back by buying something of you. So if you use it in that way, you can actually give away something for free. Otherwise, you shouldn't do it, because free doesn't mean anything to people, so they don't feel any value. So that's the free side of it. On the other side, it's very interesting that if you look into the money side of making decisions, for instance, if you don't use the dollar sign on a menu, for instance, in a restaurant, people don't feel as if they're paying money, it's easier to pay more if there's only like a 1 and 2 zeros than if there's a dollar sign and then a 1 and 2 zero. Then you see, oh, it's money, which is also interesting. There's a whole, please look it up at Google. There's a lot of interesting research on that. So doesn't make it a number which doesn't look as if it's money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think if you price it, I think it's in the book, that there's an example actually where a shop owner went away for a trip and told her colleague with a note, please give a 50% discount or something like that, but
half off, I think it was.
Yeah, half off. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But she read it wrong, so she doubled the price, and everything was sold out afterwards. So if it's something is expensive, it must be good, right? Which is also a very interesting thing. And another thing on prices is the contrast effect. So if you have a few options, people tend to choose the middle one. But also, if you see something very expensive and then something which is a little bit cheaper, you probably buy the cheaper version. But if you are aiming on selling this particular product or service, you can also use it with your price setting on selling the right product. So you could go on and on and on. The numbers are very interesting. Also, if you start with a different, for instance, I think if you do the math on 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 going on times 9 versus 9 times 8 times 7 going on times 1, well, you probably read it, but a lot of people would think, what's the bigger number? What's the bigger outcome of this? What is it? Multiplying exercise. Well, many people will say, okay, if I start with 9, it's probably the bigger one. But it's the same, but because when you start with a big number, it does something with your decision making. So this is very, very, very interesting on how you make decisions when it comes to money and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm not really sure if I'm answering any questions now.
No, I think that's really great, because so I want to go with the idea where I think where people get free, where they often do free wrong is, and now I want to get your opinion on this, because you talk about free in a very specific way, in the book, and now you've mentioned it in a very similar fashion here, but where free kind of can lead to reciprocity. I think that's a really kind of smart way of using something that is inexpensive and free if it's done right. I think where I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs get it wrong is that they will say, hey, look, I'm just kind of like a drug dealer. I'm going to give you the first one for free. And it's like, this isn't crack. They're not going to get hooked on it because you gave them one free. In fact, now they think that what you're selling them for this, let's say it's $500, you just gave them one for free. They think it's not worth $500. Next time you're going to go try to charge them $500. They're like, what? No, it's not crack. They don't need it now, right? Because they didn't try it once. It's a product or service that they could do without, right? So your idea of using free and reciprocity together, I think, is a really interesting one, where if you were to, I think in the book you talked about the reciprocity as the professor, whoever, gets the participants a couple of drinks, and then, asks them to do a favor afterwards. And they do a much better job after having received that drink than those that didn't receive a drink. And so this idea that you explore here, where it's, let's give them something for free as a, it seems manipulative, and I don't want to say it like that, because it, I mean, on the one hand, you could look at everything we do as manipulative, right? I mean,
for sure,
right? You're trying to convince your wife to eat dinner here versus there. Any decision, any sale could be seen as manipulative if you take a I don't know, a cynical approach to it. So let's just take that off the table. None of this is manipulative. It's all sales, and it's all for, a good ethical cause. You're doing something good. You're not trying to, defraud people. So
Right.
in that case, if you were to give somebody something free, something, I like the drink one. So I'm getting to a point here. I like this idea of, like, when you go into, let's say you go into a luxury watch place, right? Almost always they offer you something to drink early on. Now, on the
Yeah.
one hand, that is also being a good host, right? They're kind of hosting you there. But at the same time, I think, especially after reading your book and seeing this whole reciprocity thing, that it does kind of have the psychological feeling of, well, one, they're being polite and they're being good hosts, but two, they've done me a favor of bringing me a drink. And so now I feel a little bit of this reciprocity building up that I want to
Yeah.
then reciprocate or maybe be friendly. So, um, boy, I really wish I had a question here, because I love what you've done here. Let me ask you, so is that kind of where you're going with free and reciprocity?
This is exactly what it is. I actually bought, after I had the first edition of the Dutch book, and it went really well. My wife said, "Okay, stop complaining about those watches. Let's go to a great watch store and buy a nice watch." I was looking at this great watch for years, and exactly this happened. We went in. Nice to have you here. Have a seat. They had a tablet for the kids so they can play games and watch videos. We got some champagne. I didn't do anything. I just went into the store. And then, of course, he was talking with me, and it was really, really nice. And he showed me the watches. I could put them on and try them on. And I saw, wow, it's that time already. And I bought a watch, and I intended to, right? So
Mhm.
the thing is, I I had the money, I didn't have any problem later on buying this watch, but I'm sure I did buy the watch at that time because he was so friendly and he gave me a lot of stuff, which made it easier for me to make the decision. Um, and he probably knew, this guy is coming into with his family to buy a watch. And I think if he didn't give me the champagne and didn't offer the tablet for the kids, I might have bought the watch, but maybe weeks later, because I would think, okay, let me go home, think about it again. So in that way, it worked, and it's very, very strong emotion in reciprocity, because if you go back like ages, if you want to be secure, you need to feel safe in your tribe, right, where you live. For instance, on the African plains, if you running around, you need your tribe to survive because someone sees the line, so everyone can escape. But people need to trust you as well, and they need to keep inviting you into the group. So if I give you a little bit of food, I expect you to give me some food as well if you have some extra food, right? So this is where this emotion comes from, which is still very, very strong these days. So you can use it really, really well if you want to influence people. But of course, always, if you don't want to sell someone, I don't know, someone who has no arms, you shouldn't sell them a watch, for instance, right?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, that's a hard sell, but if you
Yeah.
can, good for you.
Well, you're a good
But
salesman. Yeah.
I know. Then they should be writing books, and we shall be taking note.
Yeah.
Um, no, I love that. And I do have to ask, as having recently got into watches myself. So what was the watch that you got?
It's an Omega
Oh,
Seamaster.
love it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
was the
Omega
first one.
Seamaster, great. Yep.
And it's
Fantastic.
an addiction. So if you have one, you
That was
won't
just your
stop.
first, right? You weren't one and
Yeah.
done. That
No,
that got it started.
no, that's also a funny thing because I bought a IWC.
Hmm.
Very great watch, but I bought it with, in mind that I have two sons. So when they get married, they both need, a family piece. So I needed another one so I can share it with my kids. And they're very young kids. So it's, of course, just something in my mind to explain it for myself. But yeah.
I love, well, what I think, not to digress, but let's digress. The thing I love about watches is there are very few items that can bring the same kind of joy that you can experience every day, that can be with you in the most intimate times, and the most exciting times and dangerous times, and kind of share all these experiences with you, and then you get to then pass that down to your children. I think I can't think of any other item that can do that. So I think, watches are just great like that. On top of,
But this is also, I think it's the cognitive dissonance, which when we're always, talking, looking for a great story for ourselves to tell ourselves, no, this is a great decision. This is what you're doing. And it's great. We need that. Don't worry about it. But of course, you could also keep the money in your pocket and invest it. Your children have more money than just a watch, right? So that's a better decision financially. But of course, we can come up with a great story like I did myself. No, I need another one. So I have both my kids. Well, I have a family piece, which doesn't make sense, of course, but it's a great story.
That's well, and that's the way to bring it right back to the topic, because I love that. That is one of those the topics in your book, one of the 35 chapters, and I think I think that's great, because at the end of the day, as you explore those, I think what's great about your book is it gives you the ability to then break down your own decision making, the decisions you've made in the past, and see where you may have been manipulated. And sometimes that's all well and good, and it worked out for the best. I think maybe 90 times out of 100, it kind of works out for the best. And and you do a great job of kind of explaining when you do need to make those important decisions. And a watch probably isn't, if you're in the position to afford a luxury watch, at the end of the day, anybody who can afford one and can get one, you don't need it. And so you're buying it, and you justify it however you want to justify it. But at the end of the day, it's because you love the watch and it brings you happiness, and that's all that matters.
That's great. Yeah, sure.
Exactly. But now when you're making an important decision, being it business or personal, I think the great part about your book is you're giving people the tools to actually do that, which I think people struggle with making good decisions. Like, well, how do I do it? And you really do a great job of giving them the tools in this book to be able to break it down. If for no other reason than knowing that these are the forces at play, and this is how you counteract them. And also, as we've discussed, how you can use those forces for good, in your own business, and to help. So, I've really enjoyed this, and I think we could talk about all of these for hours and hours. But I know, but before we go, can you tell people where they can get their copy of? Hold on, let me pull up the title. Decoding Decisions, and where they can find out more about you and your book.
Yeah, just go to Amazon. I think you're familiar with that big brand in the US as well. You can find the hard copy and the ebook there. And what my personal goals, like where we started with, is I want to inspire many people, as much people as possible, 10 million Dutch people, and maybe like 100 million or more English-speaking people, to make better decisions, and with in mind, like you said, for your own good, but also for the people all around you, right? And I hope the book helps a bit with it. Maybe just a little bit about the book, if you don't mind, Matthew.
Please.
But I wrote it because there are many books, many great books about this subject. And I wrote a lot of those, but many are very, very good, but also scientific. And I had this great book, and I read it, and I told my wife, you should read this book. And she started reading it, and we usually read before we're going to bed, so we're a little bit tired. And it was a great book for her to fall asleep, because it was tough with statistics and scientific words and stuff like that. So I decided, if I want to reach, the general public, it should be easy, right? So I added some cartoons. I added a lot of examples people actually recognize. There are like very small chapters, so 4, 5, 6, 7 pages. You can just, grab a chapter. Let's start with 24. That's fine. So that was basically the goal, to help more people make better decisions, and find it at Amazon, right?
Fantastic. Well, I think you did a great job with the book, and it is certainly a very easy to kind of understand and kind of a quick read. So I think it's a couple of hours, but there's so much in there, and it's not condensed in a tight scientific way. It's very much an easy to understand and apply kind of format. So kudos on that.
Thank you.
And yeah, everybody should definitely pick up a copy. It's a great book. Can't say enough good things about it. And
Thanks, Matthew. I appreciate it.
of course. And hey, thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.